Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the 286 Project with me, Chris Akers. And this podcast, we talk about arts, culture, politics, sport, and anything else we can think of. Now, today's guest, I've been following him on Twitter. He has his own podcast, The World of Momus. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to him because I've got some really interesting debates I want to, well, not debates, but discussions I want to get through to him. Is Momus Najmi. He's here to talk to me now. Hello.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Hi, well, thank you for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. Before we get into the meat of the discussion, I do this with all my guests. Can you just explain who you are, what you do, and how you got to this point?
So, I can't discuss my day job, so I don't discuss that. So let's
Yeah.
leave that out. But I'm a writer and podcaster. I have a few books out which are on Amazon, which is sort of fictional book. Writing a second novel these days. Hopefully, that will be better than the first one because I don't really like my first novel. And apart from that, I'm a podcaster. So my podcast is the World of Momus podcast, and it's sort of like a. It started off with being a primarily a podcast about history and mythology, and then recently, a month or so ago, I've started having guests on that podcast so that we discuss social issues are going on, social and political issues, as well as some historical issues. So yeah, that's basically what I do, and I also have a Substack if people want to find me over there as well, and everything is linked to my socials. Yeah.
So, in regards to the history, was there any particular period you talked about, or did you just like history
Well,
in general?
usually it's because I have a master's in I have my second master's in world history. It's sort of a history that I'm like interested in all over the world. um when it comes to mythology as well, I'm discussing all mythologies, Greek mythologies to Hindu mythologies, anything that I can think of. um but yeah, I mean, history, I'm more interested in British history, but it's, yeah, I discuss everything, but mainly I think so recently I've been focusing more on the British history on my podcast.
I've spoken to a few people, both on the podcast and outside it, with regards to history. Do you think I'm not just talking about this in regards to education in schools, but do you think that the British public take history as seriously as they should, or
No,
not?
no,
Yeah.
I don't think so. The world takes history as seriously as they should. um there was a I can't remember it correctly. There's a great line by this Greek satirist from long time ago, and it's about history, and it's about like he's written an essay, Lucian. He's written an essay about how to write history and stuff like that, and that he says something like history should be written by a foreigner who is of no country, so,
Mm.
and has no king, sort of a thing, and no connection of it. But I think so what he's mainly talking about is that the history is sort of like the first analytical tool that we have of gauging with what had been done, collecting data points as objectively as possible, and then using that as a forecast of what can happen, right? So in that context, I don't think so we view history as we should. We just think history as some dusty old books that, oh, what happened in the past you don't supposed to know. I think so most often we forget that it is an analytical tool for us. Like, it is the first thing that we have developed, how to view everything, what had gone and what not to do, and how to do it differently and stuff like that.
Why? I mean, you kind of explained it a little bit there, but why do you think we don't take it as seriously?
I
Bearing
just
in
don't think
mind,
so we take any sort of education seriously, because you know what, like, I felt this since even when I'm like in my late 30s, right? So even when I was growing up, I didn't grow up over here. I grew up in Kuwait, where I was born, right? And in the Middle East. And but even over there, I could see the sense of education was geared towards getting results, getting grades and stuff. So, you teach kids certain things. They learn certain patterns so that they can get certain grades, and they can pass their exams, and they can get a job, right? So that's when you make that into a part of an education, then they're only going to learn about things that you know that can benefit them and give them immediate like gratification and immediate results. So the point of these sort of subjects like history and philosophy, they're not going to matter in a materialistic world that much, right? 'Cause you don't need the history or philosophy or theology or any of those things. So I think so that might have been a part of why people have lost interest or perspective of what these subjects are supposed to teach us and how to view them as well. Because we view, let's take a bit of digression, but let's take the even the history of slavery, when it comes to just to Britain, right?
Mhm.
To a large population, that is all what is Britain defined by. And it just bemuses me, sort of like, well, you clearly don't know the history of this country, of or of these people, where you only transfixed on one little aspect. And the only reason why you know it, because it has been popularized by a certain section of people to push their agenda, right?
Mm.
So that is another factor of how we learn or why we learn things. We're only learning things either to get a job, to get a grade, or if we can use that to progress an agenda, but not to learn things.
I agree with all of that, what you have said. What I would say about history as well, and again, this is something I've mentioned on
Mm,
previous episodes of this podcast, is I think one of the things, I'm just looking from the outside in, but one of the things I think that used to happen a bit more, and especially when you see something like this in the Second World War, is the passing down of history in
mm,
families from generation to generation. And I said to someone, fun enough, recently, I said, in a weird way, the breakup of the family, one of the consequences now
mm.
is the fact that you're losing that passing down of history. Is that something you agree with, that
Yeah,
people are passing
I
down
think so.
history?
It's not just like, because history is sort of, it can be very biased when it's being passed on from family to family, like through your heritage, because obviously every single time you're going to create more myths
Mm,
to get close to it, right? The further away that you the further away that you are from the actual point of mythology, or the point of event that created a mythology or mythos around events, the greater the fantastical explanation need to get, because so that you can relate to it, right? So you have to create those bigger myths to it. So there would be some sort of bias influences, but the thing is, I think so it's more to do with losing the traditions when you lose the family units.
mm,
And those part of history are different to the objective part of history that you might learn in books or by teachers, by professors, or whatever like that. Those are different kind of history, the traditionalist history of what happened around over there at that time. So like my great great grandmother would have told her daughter and her daughter, like what actually happened, right?
mhm.
Where the meta events are going a bit separately, where the king is fighting another king, but what their local knowledge is very different and will never ever be recorded properly as well. So that loss of history, I do completely agree with you that that is a huge loss that we are having in history, and it's because we don't have the traditional family units, and we're not passing down the traditions, because we are transfixing on certain elements of history and thinking, oh, that one country is only uniquely bad, so we must not go back to any part of that country as well. So there's a lot of those things competing, I think so.
Is that part of the problem? And I'm going to come back
Mm,
to the debate in a minute. The fact that we almost see history as black and white. So a great
yeah.
example would be Churchill, in that
Mm.
he does some good things, does some bad things, but then on one side it's just all good. And look at the Second World War. Another side, look at all bad. For instance, do you think that's a problem? It's almost seen as too black and
Yeah,
white.
I think people only view it as linear as well, like people's thought as well, and they think like, let's say if I say something right now, right, to you, and we both agree on it. Let's say if we are in a position of influence, we influence some actions because of our words as well. 10 years down the line, we disagree with ourselves. Should we be remembered for that point only, or should we be remembered for how much we have progressed? And that is within our lives alone. So that's, if we see that as a country as well, any part of nation, any group of peoples, they might have thought about something differently at that point, but then their thoughts evolved to be something else. So should be transfixed of what they were pre-evolution of their thoughts, or what their thoughts have been evolved to, right? Because that is more of a definition of a people, of how their thoughts evolved, rather than how they were before, because they are different people now. And I think so as well, that and that is a part of not understanding those things, why we have such a black and white view of history. Is like, as if as if we can understand what they were feeling, as if we can understand what they were thinking, because things that are obvious to us right now were
Mm,
not obvious to them then. you know Aristotle had to come up with the obvious virtues that we see them as, oh yeah, these are obvious, like this is something that you need to have, but he had to think about them to make it obvious for us, right? So is these sort of things that we don't like really understand, and that's the same point with Churchill as well, where they don't understand, because we don't have the concept of what an empire is, right? And we just have a very um black and white view of like, oh yeah, empire is bad and not having an empire is good, right? It doesn't work like that. The world doesn't work like that. And we have no idea what was it to have the British Empire, and how to rule that British Empire, right? And how different parts in different worlds were interacting with each other, where their culture was actually negative for their own people, right? And how those were things were affecting, and we just try to blame it on one person because it's easier, and this is another problem of why we do it in black and white, because it's easier. We can in our heads we can either say, oh, Churchill was amazing or Churchill was really bad, right? It's either
mm.
the good or the devil, right? And then we don't have to think about it. And that's what people do. It's like they just choose camps. It's so much easier rather than thinking about it.
Yeah, and as I say, we'll talk about debate because there's a lot of
Hmm.
that happens in debate. But in regards to staying with history for one moment,
Hmm.
is that why you still have what you call like the sins of the father, where you'll get a group of people that are still being blamed for what they generation did ages years ago? I mean, is that the case, or why do you think that is?
I just think I think so. It's just agenda driven. I think so. Our societies have become agenda driven, and people, because people do not have the time to think as well as they're losing the capacity to think. So they rather give someone else the ability to do it for them, and so they can just follow whatever it is, right? So I think that that forms a part of that issue, is that we just not thinking about things, and we just rather, be it one thing or be it the other thing. you know I think so that is how we viewing history as well, and then we pick and choose certain parts from history, certain people, not everyone, and then they try to use that as an agenda, because they know like 99% of the people will not look it up, right? Especially in the case of social media, one popular account will put out a historical information to fit their agenda narrative out of context, little clip of what happened without even the context of what was happening around the world, within that same timeline, how parallel lives other countries were living, like, it's not right. Like right now, we weren't connected like this. Something that's happened in Britain would take months to, if even if, months for the other people of other country to know what happened over there, right? And they will have a delayed response. But I think so that's what's happening, and we are pushing those as we using education just for driving agendas.
Mm.
And popular accounts put those out. 99% of their followers just blindly follow it and believe it because it's easier to do that. They're not going to research or anything, and whoever comes next, you know it will take so much time for them to explain it or deprogram it from people with, already the damage is done.
So this I was going to talk to you about with regards to debate, in that obviously the way people debate now has changed quite a lot over the last decade.
Hmm.
Do you think people are objective enough to debate properly these days compared to like 10, 20, 30 years ago?
I think so. People still have the capacity to do that because I do that a lot with people that I don't agree with. But I think so. It has to be done out of the public view, right? Out of within social media space, I don't think so that much capacity is there, right? Out of the social media space, I think so there is still a lot of capacity there, but it is being corrupted by social media. So let's say if we take social media completely out tomorrow,
Mhm.
that will return. That capacity will return because people cannot talk like that to each other in person for that long. And even that person who's being that difficult, he or she needs to have 10 or 20 people behind them to feel comfortable enough to be that much of an idiot, or to be that rude to the other person,
Mhm.
right? So in one to one situation it doesn't usually happen. So I think that the capacity is still there, but it's this new technology and us not knowing how to dance with this new technology properly yet, because it's still new comparatively in our lifetime. So I think so that's what's creating problem, but I don't think so people have lost that ability. I think so that ability can be regained very quickly. um but it's just that I think so it's messing up with people's disposition, and that is the problem, right? Because if you're predisposed possessed to have to hold different ideas in your head and not be married to your ideas, then it's easier to have conversations with that person even if you disagree with them, right? But if that person is just so indoctrinated that they can't even change their mind, then then again, like, you don't have a conversation with that person, you have a conversation with other person who might be close to them, and then they can view it, right? And they can see how it can be done, so we can televise it or whatever. It's something that Peter Boghossian does, right, in his street epistemology.
Yeah.
I think so that's the best cure, to show people how debates and arguments should be had. I think so that's the best cure right now for it.
Did you see that clip? And I can't remember the teacher's name, but there was a teacher who he was talking to a student, and the student's off screen,
Hmm.
and he was basically, student had his opinion about J.K. Rowling.
Mm.
I don't know if you saw this, and the teacher was trying to say to him, "Okay, why is it about J.K. Rowling that she said that's supposed to be transphobic?" And he was saying this, that, and the other, and the teacher was basically encouraging him to think about it to the point where the person actually changed their mind because it was just sound bites a lot of the
Yeah.
time. And I'm just wondering, with social media, isn't one of the problems with that platform, besides it can be a real cesspit, but
Yeah.
is one of the problems that it's very not just soundbitey because he's unless you're verified, you've got a limit
Mm.
of characters, but also there's a narcissism to it, like look at me, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
And that can influence basically what you say.
Yeah, very much so. I think so. Social media is driven by that, and everyone gets captured by that. Like, I get captured by that. I think so. Everyone would captured by that, because why else do you have your account over there, right? Why else do you have to put yourself out there? Because there is a part of you that is trying to communicate with people, but there's also a part of you that is trying to validate itself by putting itself across with the rest of the world, right? So these are my ideas, do you agree with them? Or, like, sort of a thing that, oh, these are mine. So that part is there, right?
Mhm.
But the other part of wanting to communicate and wanting to course correct, that is what's missing, right? And social media doesn't incentivize people to be good to each other. It doesn't incentivize people to have honest or decent conversations. It doesn't incentivize you to admit your mistakes. That might be the biggest problem, actually, if I think about it. Because if you admit your mistakes, you will not, if you, double down more, your followers are more likely to, get behind you. But if you are correcting your own followers, you're not you're gonna start losing followers, right? So this is
Mm,
something that I usually do as well. Like if I know I'm wrong, and if I'm shown something that I'm wrong about, I would admit my mistake and I'll say, okay, you know what, I was wrong. You're right. That's a good point. Like, let's change the topic, or let's change the way that this conversation is going. Then and tell me why I'm wrong more, so that I can understand more. Or if someone who follows me and I know that person or whatever, and they say something which I think is wrong, I would not be afraid to let them know. It's like, not have wanting to, curate their thinking, but sort of like, okay, I think so. This is why you're wrong, and this is why we're going into a place where it might not be, um, plausible to have certain conversations then. But yeah, I think so. It's just social media is pitting us against each other so much, and we're competing. And that narcissistic point that you're saying is pretty much valid, because everyone has an opinion now, and everyone wants to express it as well, whether it's good or bad. And everyone doesn't even want to express it. Everyone wants agreement to their, like, this is my opinion and it is the best opinion and you should agree with it. And how dare you not agree with it? Like, and we see that in major celebrities doing it, right? And not just celebrities are pointless anyways, but major thinkers doing it, major writers doing it. Like, if you don't agree with me, then you're an idiot, basically. Your whole side is an idiot. You're right wing, like bigoted, far right person, or you're like a communist on the other side. Like, there's no in between, sort of like, or there's no pause of thinking, wait, hang on, maybe I am wrong. There's no doubt over there. Because if you show doubt, then you're showing fear, right? You're showing fear. People can smell blood and they'll come for you. This is what social
mm.
media is mostly about, and I think that that's why it happens like that.
So, linked onto that point, then, do you think there's an inability, and I'm not just talking about social media,
Hmm.
but an inability in general these days for people to say, I don't know? There seems to be this thing
Yeah.
where people almost feel like they have to be these faux pas experts at everything. You
Hmm.
see it with the war in Ukraine and Russian invasion of that. You see it with the Middle East situation. Do you think there's this inability now for people to say, I just don't know, and are almost expected to have an opinion on everything, not just on social media, but just in general?
I think so. There's a part of people having an opinion about everything, because if you don't know, then why are you even expressing it, right?
Mm,
Why don't you listen more or read more or get to know more? Why are you saying it? And on the other hand, is as well, like, some things that I do, right? So if an event happened, like the Ukraine Russia thing happened, I don't know everything about it, but what I do know about it, then I'll communicate that. But I'll always try to mention this is something I don't know, right? So I don't know why this happened, but I know why this happened.
mhm.
So if someone else has that information, then you can put two and two together, sort of a thing. But again, I think so that I don't know is the same part of, you don't want to show fear, you don't want people to smell blood, you don't want people to think that you are weak, right? So you cannot admit that you're wrong, you cannot admit that you don't know something, you cannot be humble on social media like that, because then people take you like, either you're a troll over there, or you're a know-it-all over there. Like, you can't be just humble, you can't just spread love. You've seen accounts which are spreading like more about messages about love and stuff, how less engagement they get. And I've seen my own posts, right? Most of my posts always used to be, and they still are, like, about people to, like, I'm expressing that I love you all no matter what and stuff like that. They get less and less engagement compared to if I'm fiery against someone. And but that I don't know part is very important, because people are not ready to admit I don't know, or I might be wrong, or like I just have doubts. I know this, but as far as I know, this is the case, right? If I know something about, let's say, about Ukraine and Russia, but someone else came up with more information that I didn't know before, that added to my information, and that forces me to change my position then, right, and put me in that category of I don't know. There's no incentive for me to sort of say, no, this is why I was wrong, and there's no incentive to course correct. And why I course correct, if like whoever course correct itself, people will come up with the older tweets. Oh, but you said this back then. It's like, yeah, so can I not change my mind because more evidence came through? Like, why am I being measured by what I was yesterday? That has changed now. But that is a point as well. And then we see that, eh, I think so it's not just individuals, because individuals take the lead from other higher influencers and stuff. So if they don't see influential people doing this, if they don't see, and they haven't been seeing people in media, in government, and anyone just being honest and admitting their mistake, right? We don't have good shepherds. So if you don't have good shepherds, you're gonna have bad sheep, and that's what we have. And not everyone is able to be a shepherd. Like, this idea that we're all individualistic people, like, yeah, up to a point. We can't all be our own gods. Like, you need shepherds to lead the sheep. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying in a derogatory way that those people are sheep. I'm just relating to that point, that there's why the priest has a flock. Like, they're supposed to lead them, because a priest, or whoever it might be, that person has the ability to spend time thinking about those things. That's why he's appointed in that position, to think about God, to think about these things, and then relay the message of God to them, right, in that context. So that other people can go around and do their work, right?
Yeah, yeah,
If everyone started being a priest, like food will not be grown, right?
yeah.
So yeah.
You mentioned there in your answer about people being weak, and that's just not necessarily wanted to show that, but isn't
Mm.
victimhood in a good social currency these days?
Yeah, yeah. um I think so, everything is in, every bad virtue is in good currency these days, you know and the moment it goes out of fashion, people will change. The same people will change. The same people who calling themselves victim, the same people will change once it goes out of fashion. So it's just one of those things that, because there's an incentive in doing certain things, in bad things, and because our world has become so materialistic, where we are not even concerned, it doesn't have to be religious. I'm not religious, I don't believe in a religion, right? And I'm agnostic about God myself. So, but there is something inside of you, there is a soul of you as a person, right? That is more than the material things, that yearns for more than the material things out there. But once you have trained it every single day of your life to just care about the materialistic things, right, then that part is lost underneath all of that, right? And that's all you care about then. So even if something is wrong, you are deep down, playing a victim about these things is wrong. This is, these stupid ideas of like diversity and inclusion in this corrosive manner are wrong. That, but you're still going to go and be a diversity manager because it pays you and it gets you commercial gains, right?
Mhm.
Because we are high value on materialistic society, like materialistic society, and all we are valuing is our transactions with each other person, right? And not like what it means to be us. So that connection is, yeah, I think so, because of that connection, we are having all of these things, like, people playing on victimhood, and people playing on any other bad virtue. We have multitudes of OnlyFans, like, we made whore out of our whole societies. Why? Because nothing matters apart from you gaining a few bucks.
Yeah. And sticking on the weakness theme, one of the things that, or the group of people I think that show weakness quite a lot, is our political leaders. And
Yeah.
I'm not just talking in the UK, I'm talking in what you deem the West in general. And it's led to various consequences. Where did this weakness from political leaders come from? And seeing as you're a fan of history, can you remember a specific time where we leaders in the West in general were this weak, basically?
um I think so, there has okay, if we go back way back, right, within Britain, the first Roman invasion that happened, right? So the historian at that time, the Roman historian at that time, he wrote that the biggest ally to defeat or to have, because they didn't defeat and take over Britain in the first go, but they did like all the damage that they could, and then they came back and conquered it. But he said like their biggest ally in this effort was the people, the tribes of those lands themselves, because they kept on fighting with each other, right? And some of them colluded with the Romans, and the others kept on fighting with each other. So there are always times when these sort of things happen, and they usually the times when like you have disconnected yourselves from your traditions, you have lost your national identity as a people, you know and basically you corroded morality, right? Like, and they are sort of connected, and everyone's morality, every nation, every people's morality is different according to what their traditions hold to be true, right? So I don't think so this is a unique position that we are in. It's just that it's uniquely bad because we are uniquely that well connected globally for it to have so many repercussions of one country being so bad and then affecting all the other countries as well. And this is a lot to do with America than any other Western country, because this comes from there. This hyper capitalism, where it's hyper connectivity to hyper focus on just materialistic outcomes, right? And I come back to that because that idea, that liberal idea of destroying the religions and destroying the traditions to come up with just the materialistic gains, I think so that has destroyed the West, because it has disconnected them from what they used to be to something to hold on to. And this right now, that the position that we have, the weak leaders, well, politics is downstream of culture. So culture, our culture is weak, right? And it's not just in the West, it's in most of the world right now. And there's only few big players, few strong players which are taking advantage of it. And not because they're good or they're bad, right? In their own terms they might be good to themselves. And I'm thinking about China, right?
Mhm.
And that's why China is, look at what's happening in Africa, right? China is taking over Africa faster than anyone has ever done, and nobody even knows about it. They are investing in Africa, but they're making them literally their financial slaves, right? They're buying up the assets, they're buying up the, they're making like these whole villages and stuff over there, and then they're going towards other countries as well, and that's what they're doing. Is because they are stronger doesn't mean they're right or wrong. They just know themselves. They don't have a national identity crisis, right? Their leadership and their community as such, right? Russians don't generally have a national identity crisis. They know at the core who they are, right or wrong, that's what they are. So I think so the weakness in our politics come from not knowing the nation itself, the whole nation itself, not knowing who they are, losing their traditional roots. And all of the things follow as well. And then not having family units, obviously when you're losing that traditional root, you're not gonna care about family units, right? You're gonna think like, oh, why should I be with this person if if they're not contributing this much to the family, blah blah blah. You start thinking on those terms, right? Or if I divorce now, I can be with a better person. You have a rating of people. Even if you go on those online dating sites, it's like everyone's stats is over there, as if those matter, right? Like how much they earn, or how, what's their height, what's their, like,
Mhm.
stuff like that. So I think so is we don't have good politicians because we are disconnected. And we, I say, like in Britain, British people are disconnected with their traditions and their cultures. But that's not unique. That's happening in a lot of other countries. That's happening in a lot of African countries as well. um, because they are disconnected from their true traditions and stuff, and not caring about each other. They become very selfish and self-oriented, like a lot of their leaders and stuff. and that's why they're corroding and letting Africa be like destroyed. That's the same thing that's happening in Pakistan as well. Although I don't agree with their cultures at all, but you can see the stark difference between what's happening in Pakistan and what's happening in India and Bangladesh, right? India and Bangladesh are going up, right? Because they are more connected with themselves. They
Mhm.
know who they are. So they're eventually going to elect people who actually care about the country. Inherently, they're going to care about the country. No matter how much you find, they might be um, corrupt to a point, right? You might get some corruption here or there, but inherently they would be very well connected because they wouldn't want to betray their country, sort of thing. And I think so that's the weakness that we see in politicians. It's not their fault. They are product of the culture and the environment, and we have elected them.
We've elected them, but did we have a choice? Because it's not as if the party in power and the opposition are very different in terms of what you've just described. There seem to be two sides of the same coin in that regard. So if that's the case, is it a case of, well, these, like, say in the UK, for instance, Conservatives have been in power for what, nearly
Hmm,
14 years.
hmm,
We don't like them, we don't like Labour, but
yeah,
let's just try with Labour.
yeah.
Do you think that's almost created an apathy in regards to the people?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We have a choice, and I think so. So there's a problem, right? When we talk about these things, and if we don't, even if things that seem out of people's control, but if you are British, then you have to take the responsibility. Because if you don't take the responsibility, then I feel like people are shirking their responsibility by saying, oh, it's the elites that are doing it, or it's the politicians that are doing it, or it wasn't in my power to do it. Well, it is in, like, you live in this country. Every single person who's living in this country, if you care about this country, then you have the power to do things, right? You have the power to not vote for Labour, to not vote for Tories, right? You have the power to demand proportional representation. You have the power, like, shut down the whole country, give us proportional representation tomorrow. Everyone has the power to do this, but because everyone is so self-concerned that we think, oh, it's the other person's responsibility to do it, or it's the next generation's responsibility. Oh, we don't have proportional representation, we can't do anything about it. So it's the elite's fault, right? So we keep on doing this. We keep on creating an scapegoats for our own responsibilities, no matter how hard they might be. And people might not like this. People might say, like, oh, like, I'm a poor guy living somewhere, blah blah blah, stuff like that, and what do I have to do with it? Yeah, I would agree with that, right? But the thing is, it's a responsibility of everyone, you as well, who is poor, as well as your fellow citizens, to look after you and to rise up for your rights, right? When so I've talked about this in the recent episode with the New Culture Forum guys as well. Like, in the 1960s, right? Um, Labor decided it would be good idea to get 50,000 people from Pakistan villages, right, who would not even assimilate properly, integrate properly into the Pakistani metropolitan cities. They thought it would be a good idea to get those 50,000 people in and put them in the north of England, right, so that they can fill up the worker shortages that they had. No consideration of whether the cultures were diametrically opposed or not. No consideration of if there would be integration or not. We seeing the bad effects of that decision now, right? No one cared about it back then, right? So the same people who are saying, oh, but Labor did it or Tories did it, it wasn't my fault. Well, you were there at that time. If you were there, if you connected over there, you were voting for that Labor Party. Why didn't you raise those issues? Why not? Because it's easier to just ignore that, right? So once you people, like, right now, who are angry about the house prices, right, are probably most of the same people who didn't complain when everyone was selling their London flats and houses for extortionate amount of money, right? So while they were profiting from it, nobody cares, right?
Mhm.
Because there was a self-interest. And now when the problem has become that is affecting you, and now you're like being charged about it. So it's sort of like, no, it is our responsibility, is every person's responsibility of what has happened now. Because once we accept that, then we also accept that it's in our control to change it. Because as if we keep on putting it out like, oh, it's the elites and we will never win, then we will never be pushed to take control. And it's important for a nation, a group of people to feel that they have control to change the things. Otherwise, we will be blackballed to hell. People would just leave.
Seems to me that the UK, compared to other European countries, they seem to be a little bit more apathetic when it comes to things like this. Like, I'll give you an example.
Hmm,
If you look at, say, the farmers' protest that are happening in the Netherlands and in Germany,
hmm,
the farmers there seem to be a lot more ready to come out and say,
yeah,
we don't want this. But with regards to British farmers, probably starting to now, but it seems to have taken them a little bit longer
yeah.
to come out and actually say, we're sick and tired of this, we don't want this.
Hmm.
Why do you, do you agree with me if that's the case? And if so,
I think so. It's an issue of people's disposition as well, right? So it's not within the British people to act in a certain way. And they, but when they act, they will act, because in the past as well they have acted, strongly against things that they felt was, unjust towards themselves. I think so the reaction would have been different of the farmers over here if Britain was still in the EU,
Mhm,
right? And there's a different dynamics towards it, right? Because those people have been pushed by too much, and they can see what EU is doing, right? And they can see the plans of EU. We won't be affected by it as much. So it's sort of like we cannot really have solidarity with them, that in that way, right? Also, a lot of people, because we have like sort of different, I think so, grievances when it comes to farming as well. Slightly different mechanisms of getting those grievances resolved, right? So we have to go directly to our government, sort of a thing. But we are in a limbo state as well. This year is a limbo state where we don't know what is actually going to happen. So who are you protesting against, right? So if, let's say, the elections already happened last year, then we might see the farmers over here protesting more, because they will say, oh, we can't live with this for the next 4 or 5 years like this, right? So they would have a bit more urgency. Maybe a lot of them are hesitant right now as well, because they're thinking like, okay, things might change and they might change in our favor as well. A lot of things are combined with it, but I don't really think it's just to do with the, and maybe like they are a bit divided as well as a country. I think so Britain might be that divided. I think so we are seeing now, right, since 7th of October, we are seeing more and more of the bad faith actors that are within the country. So people are like waking up to it. And I think so the European countries have seen that for a very long time, especially France, Germany, and Italy. So it's easier for them, quicker for them to rise against it, any injustice being done to them, because they know that EU, those people are completely against the EU now, because they know that how much it's grabbing their throats, right? Ours, I think so it's going to come. If it's not farmers protest, it's going to be some other protest. It is coming, because it can we cannot have this sort of level of, you know cognitive dissonance basically with reality. But I think it's just going to take some time. I think so they have had it bad for a very long time, especially with the immigration problems.
you just led me on to my next question, which
Hmm.
is about immigration. How do you feel, and I'm not just talking Conservatives, I'm talking Labour, how
Hmm.
do
Hmm.
you feel they've dealt with it over the last, say, 20, 25 years? Um, what basically why do you think they've adapted immigration policies that they have? Because it seems to be, unless you disagree, it seems to be a lot of people, both legal and illegal, coming into the country.
It's easy. It's easy to fill your market gaps with foreign people than actually work on your own people. you
Mhm.
know because that would mean that you have to change system. That means you have to spend proper resources. Actually have to invest in upskilling your own people, looking after your own people properly. It's a lot easier to just get cheap labor from outside and fill it in, you know and especially a group of people that become both conservatives and labor, who don't care about Britain anymore, who just do not care. One of them is like just using Britain as a, as a shop, like Tories are using it, right? And labor is just, they want to, it seems like they want to destroy the soul of Britain so that they can put on their whatever socialist ideas that they have, like on top of it, right? They both just don't care about Britain. I think so they're using immigration as a tool to destroy the working class,
Mm,
the core of this country, working class and middle class. I think so they're not, I don't think so they're smart enough to plan this as well. I think so is their incompetence that is leading to this point,
mhm,
right? And now that has led it so much, they don't know how to reverse, they don't know how to correct it, they don't have the mechanisms. Or they probably, actually, I think so we do have the legal mechanism, but we don't have the will within our legal systems to deport people. Even people who have committed crimes, we just cannot seem to deport them, right? So it's sort of like, I think so we just so stuck on this topic. And this is why, they did, when they think like, oh, we have gaps in social care and NHS, or get more people in, right?
mhm,
But that's an easy fix, right? Because get more people in. It's like, okay, those people, are they? Do you not think that they have families? Do you not think they are going to increase your population? Do you not think that we're going to have bigger gaps in social care and welfare then? What are we actually thinking over here? It's short termism. Like, it's just short term. We're gonna put this in, we're gonna fill the gaps, and we're gonna create our global society that we want to, or whatever. Everyone is the same, everyone wants the same thing, all cultures are the same, all peoples are the same. It's like, that couldn't be far from the truth. No people are the same. No people are equal in that respect. No cultures are equal.
Just going back a few questions, because
Hmm.
I was just thinking that, do you think, and I hate using the word woke, but I'll use it for
Hmm.
this here. Do you think there's too many people who almost live in this kumbaya fantasy? And what I mean by that is,
Hmm. Hmm.
yes, they think that, oh well, there's an easy way to achieve equality and everyone should be the same and so on and so forth. And they don't understand that sometimes the way the world works is actually through strength. I'm not talking military strength, I'm talking negotiation strength, making the other
Hmm.
people know that you mean business. And if you start messing with me, this is what's going to happen. Do you think
That's
that
how all that it's not sometimes it works.
it's
That's
all,
how it always
yeah.
works, right? Either you have soft power, or you have real power, right? That's how you negotiate. It's a matter of trade-off. And if you're weak, you're gonna get worse and worse trade-offs, right? And this is what we're having. Britain is so weak that it can't even tell Pakistan that we are sending this person who doesn't have a nationality of our country and has a nationality of you and has committed a crime in our country. We're sending him back to Pakistan. Pakistan is saying, no, we don't want him anymore. And he's staying over there here then for 7 years. That's how weak we are, that we can't even deal with a country like Pakistan,
Mm,
right? It is because of this liberal mindset, which doesn't understand that the world works in on those terms, that you have to show power. Britain always used to know this, because Britain had stronger kings, it had stronger leaders, and they were strong because they were aware of themselves. And they weren't just aware of themselves, they loved themselves, and they wanted to preserve that,
mhm,
their traditions and culture. You have a whole series of people who loathe themselves, right? Who think any other culture, from Timbuktu to whatever, comes into this country and automatically that culture is better than ours,
mm,
right? How are you going to negotiate then? And that, if you have that same mindset, you go over there, to those countries, how are you going to negotiate? You can't negotiate because you don't think anything of yourself,
mm.
right? And I think so. That is the problem. That is the problem. They do not understand, and it comes from the liberal mind, overindulgence within the liberal parts of it, and which has with the wokeness and all the progressive things comes from that same stream, you know,
Mm.
of not understanding that, the other people don't, not even understanding that there's not that much concept of liberalism outside the West, right? So automatically they don't think like you at all. They don't understand these concepts. Oh, individual rights, what the hell do you mean? you know,
Mm.
they don't work on those terms. So yeah, I think so. I don't know if it's just a matter of getting a one strong political leader, although it will help. But I think so. It's so rotten to the core, where the managerial class, as Vivek calls it, like from America, um, that bureaucratic red tape class, right? Those are the people that are corrupt with this ideology. And no matter how much you change politics, unless those people change, nothing will change, right? And that those people will change when the culture changes, from being anti-British to at least neutral, if not pro. you know, just can you even like imagine like any other country which would be so proud of being anti itself,
Yeah, yeah.
no matter what they have done, irrespective of what they have done? Do you see Mongolians being anti Mongolia?
Mm.
Yeah, I used to we used to hear these stories a lot when I was growing up in Kuwait and then in Pakistan, like about Genghis Khan, right? And that there was a story going around like the only time that Genghis Khan showed like sympathy or compassion for a mother or for a person was when his horde was going through a street and the mother was crying, oh, its baby is in the middle or something, and he put a spear through the baby's heart and took it out and gave it to the woman so that at least it doesn't get trampled on. I don't know if it's true at all, but it shows you the expression of people who have dealt with Genghis Khan, that their view of him, right? So it might not be factually true, but mythically it's true in the sense of what he was like, right? But do you see like Mongolians saying, "Oh yeah, everything about us is bad because we did horrible things in the world"?
Mm.
Not really. Yeah, how can you survive as a nation? You cannot survive as a nation then. Then you're not a people, and that's what's happening. We're making this country into international refugee center.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree with that. I think it's the same in Russia. Although imagine someone in the comments will quote me wrong, with regards to Ivan the Terrible,
Hmm.
where that's what we call him, but I think in Russia we'll call these Ivan the Magnificent, I believe.
I think so. Yeah.
Um, we see what he did as terrible, but they understand the actual goal at the end of it.
Yeah. They're like it's terribly good.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. But like I say, I don't think people realize, as I say, literally how the world works.
Hmm.
That there's that strength in many respects. And speaking of how the world works, how do you think the news media's reported these events over the last decade? Has it got any better? Has it got any worse? Has it always been like this?
They have always reported how the investors want them to report, right? So that has been the case for a very, very long time now. Probably since the 60s, 70s, like what, like they're only going to report how whoever is paying them is going to report, and that's what happens whenever any organization becomes too big for the truth to be straightforward, right? Because when so many complications come in, when so many different interests come in of different people, the truth has to be diluted, right, for the right reasons or the wrong reasons or stuff like that. That's the problem with the media, and I think that's why we're seeing the death of media, and they're always going to report. If they have the capacity to change, they will change, but it depends on their investors, right? So eh, let's say if I had £1 billion, right, and I bought, like, let's say more than a billion, whatever, unlimited amount of money, and I bought Sky News, right?
Mhm.
All those same anchors will start saying what I want them to say. They'll start investigating on things what I want them to do,
Mhm.
or at least, even if I don't tell them directly, they would know what would make me happy. It's sort of like editorial sort of a thing. Like, it has to be done that way because someone is paying your wages, right? That's why we see. So it's not even, I don't know if even it can be discussed properly, like how they're reporting, because it depends. It just depends from day to day
Mhm.
with them, like, and it's not. I don't. So a lot of people pay too much attention to conspiracy sort of theories and stuff like that. I think it's just a lot of collective interests of different people that come together and make them behave in similar or certain ways, which
Mhm.
benefits them, right? It's sort of like selfish interests coming together and makes it think like there's a conspiracy, that there's a puppet master doing that, but it's actually their self interest coming together, and they just happen to act like that, right? So if the investors of the media, especially the left leaning media, has an investment within Ukraine, then they're not going to tell us the truth about it. you know they're not going to tell us the truth that, yeah, we need to support Ukraine, but not for Ukraine,
Mhm.
right? Because Ukraine is the second most corrupt country in the world, in Europe, apart, like, the first being Russia, right? So it's not really a thing for us to be supporting in the first place. Is going to report, like, why are we supporting them? For our benefit, so that Russia doesn't have like that much influence on the West, you know or on the partners of the West. We have to push back on that, right? That's the only reason why anyone from NATO would want to support Ukraine, not because of safeguarding democracy in Ukraine. Who gives a toss about that? It's
Mhm.
That's for the people of Ukraine to deal with, you know
Mhm.
so. But the media is not going to support that, because if the media is invested in, whoever's investing media is invested in that concept of what will happen in Ukraine, how many weapons they're going to sell so that they can make more money, and then after that they get to rebuild Ukraine then, and they get more money and stuff, right? So they're going to direct media in those sort of pushing those certain narratives, and that's the same with progressive ideologies, woke ideologies. I think so. Everything when it comes to that, it just that's why the way forward is the new media.
Mhm. Okay, cool. And you talk about building new media, obviously discussing podcast um and Substacks as well. Just quickly then, because this will be the final question. It's
Mm,
been a fascinating
yeah.
interview. Two parts. One, how do you see new media developing over the next 5 years?
Mm.
Two, of a wider point, how do you what positive could happen over the next 5 years in regards to what's happening with UK and society at the moment? Or is there anything positive?
Um, but even in the negative, there's positive, right? So even in the negative, a lot of people are going to suffer, but the positive is that people will start rediscovering their identities and themselves as a nation, right? And they will group together, and people will realize that they are the ones in majority, right? The people who love this country, who are of this country, are in way more majority than those who don't mean this country well. Once that realization comes in, then mobilization will happen towards what the collective goal should be, right? So even in negative, there will be some positive. How new media will develop, I think so we're seeing, like, within UK, right? Because outside of UK, in America, we've seen how Daily Wire has developed, right? Daily
Mhm.
Wire is the blueprint of how the new media will evolve, right? If someone can do what Daily Wire is doing over here, then it's an instant win. All these other channels will start crumbling down because people do not want to watch them, right? What I see a lot is from podcasts like Trigonometry, podcasts like New Culture Forum, and the Lotus Eaters and stuff. These places, they are not just podcasts. right? They're not just like my podcast when I'm just talking to people. They're not just podcasts.
Mhm.
They are people who are employing other people, and they're doing other bits behind the scenes. And they are reaching out to their communities as well. They're building their communities, so they're building capacity for others to collaborate with them in the future. So I think so the new media takes in when it can connect the physical with the digital, right? So when it can have physical offices as well, like bigger offices which are prominent, so people can actually visualize institutions, that because they're building new institutions, right? You can't just build institution digitally. So once it start doing more and more into physical, I
Mhm.
think so that's where the paradigm changes. And I see New Culture Forum doing that actually, when they've created their local communities, and they're bringing people together. They're doing shows in person. A lot of other people are doing it as well. Unheard are the best one out there that is doing it. They are one of the best in UK with the new media, because they go out and they do these programs and they bring people together,
Mhm.
right? So I think so the move is there. What will really kill it off is when we stop enforcing people to pay for BBC.
Yeah.
When that happens, instant kill. I think so it's an instant kill. And if there is someone ready to take that role, especially with the news sort of a thing, right? So we have I forgot their names. In America we have these two people. They have a really nice, like really good, like news channel, and they're broadcasting news and stuff like that all the time.
Okay.
It's just completely escaping my mind, but they are Breaking Point, I think so they're called, something like that. um we will, once there's gaps like that, the actual journalist will come in, you know
Mhm.
the actual investigative journalist will come in. People would want to hear them. People don't actually want to hear these, just that they are not available that much, right? My neighbor, like he's an old guy, not that old, but he's not that connected digitally and stuff. He doesn't even know what, like, how to access my podcast or from YouTube and Spotify and stuff, right? So that this needs to become an institution, like GB News came on our TVs. Once it comes out of the online into the physical sort of thing where everyone can access it, where you improve the accessibility, I think so that's going to be a game changer. It might happen if two or three different platforms decide to come together and collate together for this to happen.
Mo, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Can you just remind everyone of what the name of your podcast is and also the name of your Substack?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a great conversation as well. And everyone can find me on everything of mine is at the World of Momus podcast, or at the World of Momus. You can find me on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. Apparently, my podcast, which I didn't know, is on Amazon as well. So it's everywhere. It's on Rumble as well. The World of Momus podcast, and you can find me on Twitter on that same handle, as well as other social medias where I am Minds or Instagram as well. I think so, yeah.
Oh, cool.
And
Okay,
Substack as well. Substack, I think so people can just go Momus Najmi and they'll find me over there.
it's been an absolute pleasure. I'll leave the links to both of those in the description to this video. Again, absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you.